How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Fire Emblem 3 Houses Blue Lions Maddening Mode low turn count playthrough, chapters 13 and 14. My name is Mekkah, and thankfully I'm not playing, but I am commentating. This is Hunting by Daybreak, probably the worst chapter in the series, and definitely the worst chapter in 3 Houses. No preparation screen, just 2 units to start with against a bunch of angry assassins. If you're not careful, this chapter can softlock you. We have been very careful, but nonetheless, Dimitri is stuck in a footlocked class, no matter what he was before Timeskip, and he's been given a battalion with full health, which means we cannot use Battalion Wrath or Battalion Vantage. Instead, we have to rely fully on Byleth, and that's why she's been fully prepared and maxed out her durability. She's been given a Fortress Knight certification for a good base defense, and on top of that, we gave her every single HP stat booster, we rigged her level ups, and we gave her 2 months worth of Ambrosia from Gardening, which means more defensive stat boosters. Nonetheless, she has to dodge a couple of archer shots on her way here, and she has to be in that position particularly, for one, because it stops most of the one-range enemies from reaching her, since she's on a wall tile surrounded by other wall tiles, and in addition, it also puts her in range of curve shotting the boss, because this is a kill boss chapter, you don't have to kill all these enemies, thankfully. She was only able to reach this because we put reposition on Dimitri by mastering the soldier class, so that was very important. And now, this does put Dimitri in a precarious spot on enemy phase, and we gave him the Lewin to make sure he could one-hit kill enemies on enemy phase, which means he doesn't get doubled by some of the thieves. Now, Byleth flies over to kill the fake Pallardo on turn 2, using a curved shot, killer bow critical. This will spawn the real Pallardo, who's the actual kill boss objective, and he's going to run away from us now. If he spawned at the bottom, with our current position on Byleth, we wouldn't be able to reach him. We could have remedied this by putting Byleth 1 down and 1 left from where she is, and that is in fact a more reliable clear. That way she can reach both versions of him no matter where he comes. Dimitri, through the time skip, he has gained an upgrade to his personal skill, where he gets plus 20 avoid if he's at full health. This does help him survive when he's in a forest, but it's not quite reliable still, because once he does get hit, which is pretty much inevitable, he is still going to be at the avoid he would be otherwise. It also doesn't help that our Dimitri doesn't have Swordbreaker, because we've been focusing so much on bows and axes and flying to get in the ranks that he needs for the low turn count clears, but that's just how it is. This chapter is so bad that I have an entire video dedicated to clearing it, not just in Blue Lions, but also in Golden Deer and the Church Route. Although in those versions, it's not too bad, because Seteth and Claude are in much better classes than Dimitri ends up being in. Still, if you're stuck in this chapter yourself and you want to find a cheesy clear to get out of here, I do recommend checking out that video, because I think it could really save you the headache of having to go through all these super tedious enemies. In those clears, you do make use of some other units, particularly the ones that spawn at the bottom left. In our case, that's Annette and Mercedes. We've been too quick to really make use of them, and they're just going to engage in some self-improvement. But if you're playing casually, then it might be useful to have, for example, Impregnable Wall and Stride on them to make sure that someone like Byleth can make it over to the boss safely and not have to rely on dodges or a lot of defense stacking like we did. The upper left units are generally useless though. In our case, it's Ash, who we haven't trained, and Gilbert, who is a new recruit and a pretty interesting one. In this chapter, he is stuck as a Fortress Knight, and next chapter he's going to be just an adjutant, but you will eventually see him on the field, I can guarantee that. As is, Byleth just has to fly out to the boss and use Sublime Heaven to kill him. We don't have to rely on Curve Shot this time, thankfully, because it's close enough. And that clears Hunting by Daybreak in 3 turns. Let's move on to chapter 14. Fortunately, unlike in last chapter, we have access to the monastery and the preparations menu now, so we can assign skills, items, and classes as needed, and that's going to be necessary because this is a route map. It's also a defend map. If any of the enemies reach the pink tiles behind your units, then you do lose. Our group is split into 2. On the right side, we have Lysithea warping Byleth further in to take care of most of the routing. Lysithea needs exactly 6 range of warp to be able to accomplish what she needs to here. And then we have Seteth assigned to taking care of the Pegasus Knights. They are pretty dangerous. There's actually an advanced class of Pegasus that is enemy only. These enemies are very good at killing Lysithea, for example, and other fragile units. If you've ever played Maddening before, or even hard mode, then you know just how annoying Pegasus Knights can be in this game. On the left side, we have a much larger group available, and this is where we have the majority of our buffing skills. We have Ferdinand von Eyre use Rally Dexterity on Dimitri, and we follow up with Stride and Retribution. And Retribution in particular is only casted on Dimitri, Felix, and Sylvain. They're going to be taking care of the majority of the enemies in this chapter, as is usual. We have a very effective player phase coming up here for the left side. A lot of the enemies start very close to your starting point, and if you don't route a lot of them, your fragile units, such as your Dancer, can be in immediate danger. But thankfully we have just the tools at our disposal. If you look carefully at the formation that our wyverns are making, you might catch on to what we're doing here. During the time skip, we gained access to a new battalion that is probably familiar if you've tried breaking this game before. It's called the Blue Lion Dancers, and they have a gambit called Dance of the Goddess, which is capable of dancing for 4 people at once and allowing them to move again, as long as they're in a T formation. And that's exactly what we're doing here with Bernadetta and our 3 strong wyvern riders. Now, this battalion is very powerful. It's A rank, so that's why we have it on the net right now, who has the required authority rank. Once Leonie reaches it, we're going to hand it to her though, because Leonie is capable of using advanced classes due to her higher level, whereas the highest class that Annette can use is Cavalier. This class cannot be used by flyers, by the way, which is why we're using it on grounded mounted units. And this allows our 3 wyverns and Bernadetta to move again, and Bernadetta dancing for Dimitri allows him to get even further in. Dimitri is going to take care of the majority of the combat in this battle. So far, we've been using the knowledge gem on him, because we really want all the X rank we can get. But from here on out, he's going to be using the critical ring to maximize his crit. Against his sniper, he actually has his crest backfire on him. He has the minor crest of Bladed, which doubles the amount of weapon uses that he consumes when he's using a combat art. It procs randomly. So we used the Divine Pulse to undo that, and instead we went for a normal crit instead, so that we didn't have to run out of killer axe uses halfway through the enemy phase. And then from there, we just have Felix and Sylvain wrap up a couple more enemies. Ferdinand is going to stay behind and bait exactly 1 enemy to break a battalion a little bit. But other than that, none of the enemies are able to threaten either defense tile or more fragile units like Bernadetta, thankfully, thanks to the exact formation that we're making here. Now, it cannot be overstated just how effective Dimitri is at routing enemies, thanks to Battalion Wrath, Battalion Vantage, Crit plus 10. But we had to take a couple of extra measures to make him extra reliable, because the hit rate against the Pegasus Knights would be pretty bad if it wasn't for all the ways we buffed his hit rate. We've given him the Rally Dexterity from Ferdinand. We got him up to B axes for Lancebreaker, and we've also, of course, just made sure the rig is level ups. All these important 2 important hit rates. Dimitri, besides Battalion Wrath, Battalion Advantage, has another huge advantage over other route units, and that's the fact that he has really high charm. So if an enemy tries to gambit him, he is very likely to dodge it. Gambits are usually disastrous for units that are trying to route a map, because they can be pushed in a different spot, or they can be have their stat debuffed, their battalion bonuses taken away. That is very annoying when that does happen. Byleth, by the way, is holding the Caduceus staff, which was an idea by Fish, I do believe. This is a pretty funny idea. Byleth is trying to chip down the battalion that she's using, also trying to train it. That's why she has Model Leader. And chipping it is pretty hard for Byleth because she's so bulky. But the Caduceus staff actually reduces her avoid a little bit to make that easier. Also worth noting is Dimitri is having Gilbert as his adjutant, who is leveling up alongside him. Gilbert, we haven't really talked about him too much. He joined us in Armor Knight last chapter, but he actually has the required Axe rank and by now the Flying rank to qualify for Wyvern Rider, and he's going to be an extra useful, basically just another character that can route chapters for us. He has a really high base level, the highest in the game in fact on the Blue Lions route, and that makes training him very easy, in the same way that Aloe was very convenient pre-time skip. Dimitri actually ends up reaching level 30, even level 31 on this chapter, but because we cannot tutor him, it's actually pretty difficult for him to reach the required ranks for Wyvern Lord, which is what we're shooting for both him as well as some of the others like Felix and Sylvain. But eventually he's going to reach it. It's just that while he's in his angsty state, you cannot tutor him, so he gains weapon ranks very slowly, which is why we're trying to use the Knowledge Gem on him whenever possible, as well as on Bernadetta to unlock the special dance ability. Fortunately, we have 2 knowledge gems now, so they can both profit from it without having to trade it back and forth between the 2 of them all the time, which would probably end up with one of them missing out at some point or another. Now, Seth has another Pegasus Knight to use Assembly on, again, to make him less threatening. We dismount him to make sure that he ends up in a force, thanks to Assembly pulling him 1 square back. And we also have Byleth equip a ranged weapon, just to make sure that he got a Gambit boost as he did his Gambit. Byleth has 2 enemies left to kill, one of them on the Ballista. You might wonder why we are going for routing this map instead of making sure that the NPC Swordmaster that reinforced on turn 1 NPC phase makes it to the Ballista, because that actually sets the whole map on fire and results in turning the map into a kill boss map if you manage to bait the boss into attacking you. But unfortunately, this is actually slower no matter what you do. It's faster in a real-time setting like a speedrun, but it requires a minimum of 3 turns spent on the map, and we're routing it in 2. So for an LTC setting, it's much better. And if it was equally fast, we would probably still route it because it gives us access to a lot more experience in both levels and classes and all that kind of stuff. Now, at the starting point, we don't really have a whole lot left to do. It is worth noting that Linhardt and Ferdinand didn't actually have to end up killing this guy, but they could have if they needed their player faces to be free. But we got like a crit somewhere that made it unnecessary. But really, most of the work in this map has been done by Dimitri. Some other notes before we close out the chapter. Byleth is actually in Pegasus Knight, unlike our Wyvern friends, because we still want to master that class, and in maps where we don't need to have maximum movement, it is better to work towards that, kind of in a similar way as for where Sylvain was in the Brigand class during the previous Bergmark Siege chapter. To aid with reliability in general, we actually cooked Dexterity +8, which is a ridiculous amount when you think about it. It's especially useful for Dimitri because you have to face so much combat, but it helps everyone else have like near 100 hit rates too, or even just hit 100 hit rate. We have Sylvain fly over all the way to the right actually, because Byleth by herself could not kill these two enemies. The way they're positioned, we're just not allowing it. And Asithia actually takes care of one last enemy this turn too, by killing a knight that was left alive. We gambited him earlier to prevent him from killing us. Also note on the other adjutants, I've discussed Gilbert. Ingrid and Flane are other adjutants, but they are not here to gain EXP. The point with using that is pretty much gone at this point in the run, but they are still useful for providing Byleth and Felix some attack bonuses as they're supporting people, and they can also be helpful for Gamma Boost in the same way, so that's why they're here as adjutants. Fortunately, they both have access to flying classes, so we're not limited by that. Dimitri uses a Gambit to get Randolph off as a healing tile. This is a tactic we've used many times before with bosses that are on, tiles that give bonuses, just to make them easier to kill on enemy phase. And it also gives us chip plus hit XP. Also worth noting that Sedeth is using Battalion Wrath on enemy phase to make sure he criticals. This of course would incur some damage to his battalion, but fortunately we have defensive tactics on him to prevent that from being an issue. And yeah, that is going to be this chapter, cleared in 2 turns. I hope to see you next time for chapter 15. Peace out and goodbye.